Hello everyone and welcome to Inside Leather History, a Fireside Chat. I'm Doug OKeeffe and I am the host and producer of the chats, which are a program of the Leather Archives and Museum. Today I'm in suburban Palm Springs. What is it, Cathedral City? Cathedral City, and I am with Joe Easton. Joe is a member of the Leather Uniform Kink community for over 50 years. He's welcomed us to his home. We're going to do the interview a little differently than I normally would. We're going to walk through with Joe, see some of the work that he does, and some of the creations that he can show us. So without further ado, we're going to walk in the house. Well, Joe, thank you for welcoming us to your home today. It's very gracious of you. You have some amazing things here, but before we begin, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your early life. Your family moved around a little bit. You had to learn to adapt. What was going on when you were young?
Well, my parents moved 35 times before I was 15.
My gosh.
And I went to 11 different schools before I started high school.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 17 different states and 26 different cities.
Oh my gosh.
So I was always the new kid, and I was also always the tallest one in my class at that time until I hit the 7th grade.
Okay.
My parents, I was born in South Dakota, and I had an accident where I was badly burned when I was 3 years old. My parents were unable to take care of me, so I went to my grandparents. My grandparents taught me the skills of sewing leather, gardening, house repairs, carpentry, animal husbandry, and cooking.
Certainly sounds like it would have made you a great husband.
Survivalist type of stuff. But I ran with a lot of that stuff. And this is an example of a leather kimono that I made out of thrown away scraps from an upholstery shop.
Wow. Wow.
There are 600 colors of leather in this thing. No two pieces match any other piece in the entire outfit.
That is incredible. I can't believe the workmanship.
It also has a headdress to go with it so that I stand over 8 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
When I wear the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. You have another exquisite piece here. Let's look over at this one. I don't even know if I can get the whole thing on my camera, but we'll try.
This piece, I had a major stroke and I was home alone down on the floor for 4 days before I was discovered. And I had lost the entire usage of my right side.
Oh.
I had also lost my ability to speak any language at all. And I had to learn to speak English all over again, to walk, to talk. And this was my recovery piece. I had to learn how to sew all over again and how to design. I made this in 8 months with about 40 hours a week.
Oh my gosh.
It was voted one of the top quilts in top 30 quilts in Canada, where I was living at the time of that year, at a national juried show that had several thousand entries.
Wow. So Joe, we've walked into another room in your house, and it's, I guess, your workroom. I mean, you're standing there with your sewing machine, and in fact, there are two. This one's a little more modern. That one's fascinating. Now, you discovered bondage at a very early age, and your interest in leather began. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was in the 5th grade when I was physically fully grown. And my body was, I went through puberty in the 5th grade.
Okay, that's young, but yeah.
When I entered the 6th grade, I had a beard and a mustache and was sent home to shave it off. I was quite precocious. My dad had a leather jacket, tall engineer boots, and motorcycle gloves. And I found them to be quite erotic and quite exciting, so I would put them on and get excited, and I would have little explosions of joy without touching myself, just touching the leather. And within a few months, I got into the tying myself up and hoisting myself to the top of the garage with just boots, jacket, and gloves on.
Yeah, little devil.
I was also into sea hunt, the rubber scene, also into uniforms and uniform type leathers. So, and this was by the 6th grade.
That's an awfully young age to be exploring all this.
Yes. But my dad had Playboy and Hustler magazine on the coffee table. Not hidden, on the coffee table at home.
Incredible.
And at an early age, when we moved to Fresno back in 1960, we had a drive-in restaurant in the rough section of town. So I got used to the pimps and the whores and the drug dealers all coming into our place to have lunch, dinner, breakfast.
Wow.
And so I was overexposed at an early age.
Is there any one piece of information you found definitive that they taught you?
Nobody taught me, and there was no information available. But what I did find was in the public libraries in the adult sections. And it wasn't very good information. It was mostly conjured stuff that was, as I found out later, to be totally false. All gay men do not wear dresses.
Nope, we don't. But you have some amazing quilting pieces and things here as well. Tell us a little bit about these.
This is called a sampler. A sampler has an odd number of squares, and this one has 13. This is based on the Philadelphia sampler.
Yes.
And each of these squares was done individually and sewn together to make one complete square. This won Best of Show at 3 different quilt shows.
Wow.
And then that one, I based it on the star charts.
Okay.
The Ancient Mariners.
Oh, okay.
And that was, I needed to learn how to do reverse applique for that one. This one shows 14 different kinds of ways of doing a quilt in doing all of these things.
Wow.
And to give you another example, I'm working on a Western shirt, and this is almost half done.
Oh.
For putting the roses on the yoke of a shirt.
Oh. Joe, you were in Catholic seminary back in the 60s when, around the time of Vatican II. Tell us about that.
It was a big time of change. We were actually exploring questions that I had about the church before I went to the seminary. I was concerned that it was a patriarchy type of setup, and I thought it should be more open for women to participate in the Mass, be ordained, be bishops, even a pope someday, again, Pope Joan. But I was a little too radical for the seminary.
Oh.
But it did teach me a lot about how to prepare for testing, how to think about things, how to think outside the box, and come up with other answers, and yet be truthful all at the same time. That led into me, after the seminary, I got drafted, and then in order to avoid going to the Army, I enlisted in the Navy, where I was a corpsman, a hospital corpsman in the Navy. That's a medical EMT type of person. I worked in the emergency room for most of my time in the Navy and rose in rank quite fast because I did exceptionally well in the tests that they had for rising in rank. I went from E1 to E5 in 2 years, which was pretty fast, even back then. And the medical knowledge that I gained at that time was quite helpful later on in life. When I went into law enforcement, I was frequently the go-between between the sheriff's department and the medical staff that we had there at the facilities, and balancing out the rules, regulations, and laws that both had that were sometimes contradictory.
So tell us about your time in San Francisco, because you were there in what a lot of people would call the glorious heyday of the leather kink and everything else scene.
I came out in 1970 by leaving Lemoore Naval Air Station, going up to San Francisco. And I read the Chronicle and Examiner for any kind of information and went to the hot spots at that time, which were Polk Street, Folsom, and the Castro. And it was an eye-opener because I had been looking for people like myself who were kinky, into leather, and other forms of things, and wanted more sexual expression than just the basic pump pump.
So tell us something definitive that you experienced at that time.
I was basically a virgin on my first night out, and I went back with 7 different men in 4 different places on my first night out. So I went from virgin to slut in one night.
Wow.
My first sexual experience was actually fisting a guy.
Huh.
And that I did before I came out while I was a corpsman in the Navy. This guy came into the hospital and he had a shot glass up his butt. It was the night when there was a big to-do for the doctors. And they were all dressed in their full formal, and they didn't want to have a full surgery that night. So they gave the guy a muscle relaxant, Valium. They put him in the proctoscope table and put a bottle of real poppers under his nose. Well, I squeezed a whole tube of KY jelly up his butt, did a finger check to make sure there were no cuts or tears, and while I was doing that, all of a sudden, I was down to the wrist, and he shot his first load at that point. I found this extremely erotic.
Did you get the shot glass out of it, though?
Yes, but I had to reach in to get it. And then as I was pulling it out, we hit the prostate. And he shot another body-shaking, earthquake-style orgasm. And I've got a shot glass in my hand, so that's a big bulk. And as I pulled that out, he had his third orgasm.
Oh, my God.
The doctor threw his hands up in disbelief and said, "You write it up. I don't want him kicked out, and I'll sign the paperwork in the morning." Well, I had to go take care of the patient, get him back on his sitting up down while he recovered from all of that. Then I had to go to the bathroom and beat off a few times before I could fit back into my whites.
After that, tell us what's behind you.
This is a display of all of the sheriffs of California, the patches that they have on their uniforms. And this is badges from around the western United States. And then that's a Franklin Mint collection of western badges.
Incredible.
I have at least modest collection of uniforms, patches, badges, and such. I only got about 1,700 patches and 90 badges, 20 sets of uniforms.
Let's go look. So we've changed our venue here in your home a little bit. But as we're looking at some of these quilt pieces that you've created, and they're dramatic, they're profound, tell us a little bit about the historically significant people you met in San Francisco when you came into the scene. Important people.
Well, the first person I met was my first lover, Randy West, who became a publisher and was one of the early publishers who gave Tom of Finland an even break for the first time. Randy had Tom do 4 watercolors that he turned into greeting cards, and he paid Tom of Finland $1 per card that he sold. In 1 month, he sold over 20,000 cards.
Oh my gosh.
That enabled Tom to come to the United States and make a tour of the US. And while he was making the tour for 3 months, Randy sold over 120,000 cards. So he handed Tom a check for $120,000 at the end of his tour. And Tom literally had to sit down because he said that was more money that he had made with those 4 pictures than all of his artwork combined his whole life.
Incredible.
Randy also helped him to get back the copyrights to his earlier works for Cake and the other Tom of Finland drawings that had been published in the 50s and the 60s, and that someone had made millions of dollars on, but had paid Tom less than a few $1,000s.
Who are some of the others?
Dirk Daner was Tom's close friend at that time and confidant. It was nice meeting him right after he had won both the drummer contest and International Mr. Leather. The first winner of IML was a friend of mine who worked at the same bar. I worked briefly between careers as a paramedic and in law enforcement at a night shop at one of the bars. Back then it was called The Bolt. And he was a bartender, and I helped him get his leathers together for IML.
You mean David Close, yes?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Way back.
Yeah, yeah.
I worked for Alan Selby, who was the owner of Mr. S. I brought in the patterns for breeches and the police shirt and the plain dress type shirt to them, and several other items that they still use to this day.
Incredible.
I lived at one point in the 70s, I lived on 15th Street, just a few blocks from the Castro. And Harvey Milk's was the only place you could get your film developed where they wouldn't destroy the film if it was anything that had to do with the Gay Pride Parade, the leather community, or even just friendly pictures between men. You'd go to other places and they would literally cut the negatives so that you couldn't use it again.
Yeah.
And Harvey's was the only place you could go. And he was one of the friendliest guys there. He had a wonderful memory for names, and he was always friendly, always willing to talk about things. If you had a comment about what he had done, yeah, well, like the pooper scooper thing. Oh, at the very end, what does he do? He steps in dog food.
Yes.
Well, that was well planned out, trust me. But it was, I used to take the same bus to and from work as he used to, from the Castro area down at near City Hall and then back again. Well, I'd see him quite frequently on the way there, and I saw him the night before he was assassinated.
My gosh.
And made a comment, watch out for Dan White. He's really unbalanced. And sadly, he was. Dan White was the one who assassinated him, and the amount of grief that poured through the city was almost palatable. And we heard it in the late afternoon on the news, and I literally sat down and cried for one of the few times in my life where I was really heartbroken that someone who was so good for our community was cut down in the prime. Then lots of us went to the Castro, and they kept pouring in, and finally we marched down Market Street without a permit. And the police were all upset that we were daring to take over the streets. And when we got to City Hall, they lit up the Lincoln statue and put a big sign over the front of it saying Harvey or milk.
Yeah.
And candles for, there must have been a half acre of candles in that area from all the people that we put our candles down there for that. Same thing later on when we, Cleve Jones started with the, when we started fighting for the rights of people with AIDS. And we had the big march on City Hall, once again without a permit, to protest what was happening and all the people that we were losing. And there was nothing anybody was doing at that time.
Yeah. Tell us about the quilt that's on the bed here in the Leather Pride colors. I'm going to try to get a good video of this.
Well, it's the Leather Pride flag. So it's the black, the blue, and the white with the red heart. Tony Dubois was the one who designed it. And he initially said that it was all his inspiration, but there was a drag queen about a year earlier who was wearing the same kinds of colors. The big black and blue stripes with a white sash across.
Yeah.
Running for one of the, I forget whether it was Empress or Dowager or what. The regular Pride flag was made by a neighbor of mine when I was living down in the Folsom area.
Okay.
He lived around the corner from us, and that was not too far from where we had the Folsom Fire in 1981, which was right off my back porch.
Please explain that. I don't know of it.
The Folsom Fire was where 132 buildings went up in 5 minutes by an arsonist.
Oh.
One person eventually died of a heart attack that was caused by the fire.
Oh.
But the buildings went up. There were over 250 people that lost their homes or the places they were working from that. And what it was there was a previous hotel was being converted into a bathhouse, and a plumber who was fired for not bringing his work up to minimum standards for his plumbing work was fired, and he went back and torched the place.
Okay.
The fire was so hot that it melted the cars that were on the street between the buildings that caught fire. The street caught fire, and it liquefied, and it was almost like glass smooth. We were lucky that it didn't get worse, because one of the buildings that the fire department fought so hard to keep from getting caught in the flames was an auto repair shop that had a tanker that was half full of gasoline. If that had blown, it would have taken out part of the bridge and the freeway.
So, Joe, tell us about how AIDS impacted the community in San Francisco.
Starting in about 82, there was suddenly a lot of people who were passing away very quickly. And it was found to be HIV leading into AIDS. These posters here were announcements for fundraisers for a lot of the early AIDS projects. And we would have parties beer bus, and so forth. And these would generate the first fundraisers that we had with the Phoenix Uniform Club and one of the other events.
Incredible.
So we had fundraisers all the way from 83 on up to much later. Wow. And I did a lot of, I did security for a lot of the early fundraisers, got to meet a lot of wonderful people like Elizabeth Taylor, Michael Jordan. The list went on, and all the big stars that would come for these events out at Golden Gate Park or down at the Opera House or at the War Memorial Building or at City Hall.
Wow. Wow. Joe, I hate to put you back in the closet. I know nobody should have to return, but you have an amazing collection of items in here, and I'm going to take a quick picture of that for everyone to see.
Everything from kilt, vests of a lot of different kinds.
Well, tell us about these things. You were a police officer, you were a sheriff. Tell us about these items. How do they fit into your timeline?
I was into uniforms from an early age. Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Explorers. I was a seminarian. That's a type of uniform. Navy and a paramedic. We all wore uniforms. I also wore uniforms in law enforcement. I was part of the Phoenix Uniform Club. I was a founding member back in 1977. The club went to 2011. We had some of the best parties that we had ever in San Francisco.
What made them so great?
We had a live band with over 25 people in the band. Sharon McKnight was our singer, and we started out at $35 an hour the first year, and we went up to $75 years later. But we donated everything that we made to the various AIDS projects.
Okay.
And we kept our starter money where we had to pay the down for the room and to buy the food. But we did a lot of legwork, and we got a lot of free stuff to make the donations even bigger. So, like, I have a tartan that I made out of leather, vests of a variety of sizes, colors, and shapes.
Incredible.
Long sleeve police shirt, my old department in colors, tank or collared tees or golf shirts, Western style jacket, a Mountie style jacket, but not quite. Did it slightly different colors.
Incredible.
Just a few things.
Incredible. Beautiful.
And even jackets. I made one-piece jumpsuits, other jackets like this one, and the breeches and pants and chaps to go with them. And I also made the hats.
Incredible. There's one in particular I'd like to ask you about because I find it fascinating. It's behind us here, and I'll loop around, but get all of this in here. You've got an East German, is that an army hat? Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a gift for one of my birthdays from a friend.
Have you worn that out and around?
I have.
Okay.
But I've also worn all these boots and hats out too.
Incredible. Simply incredible. Making me jealous, I gotta tell you.
Well, we've outgrown the closet, so.
So, Joe, tell us about your first day of work with the Sheriff's Department.
Randy Schultz had printed an article in the Chronicle about a new test that they were thinking would define what HIV was. And he printed that article along with the names of everybody who had taken the test.
Oh.
and indicated that everybody who had taken the test was positive, even though they weren't. And as a result of that, several people committed suicide. Many people lost their jobs. There were several divorces. People were thrown out of their homes, out of their apartments. And my first day at work, I walked in, and the rest of the staff was booted, gowned, capped, and gloved in protective gear, and they all had masks on, and none of them would work with me. My first day at work, I was told to go back and take care of a section with over 180 inmates, but no instructions, no walkthrough, no description of what to do. They wouldn't even give me the training manual. And actually, I had to depend on the inmates to help me to work my way through my first day at work. That night, I called up the public health department to find out what information they had about what HIV and AIDS really was. They had no printed information that was of use to me that I could train everybody else on. Because of my medical training, I thought, well, that's not going to work. I had a friend who was a member of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Called them up. They said, oh, we have exactly what you need. It's one page, one side, and how many pages do you need? I told them, I'm going to be training about 200 people on this in the next 4 days. They said, fine, we'll be there in 2 hours. And they were.
Wow.
2 hours later, they delivered to my home 300 pages of information that I was able to use and train everybody at work about what HIV was, how you got it, how you didn't.
Incredible.
And I became de facto the AIDS counselor for the department, whether I wanted to be or not. Now, I was HIV negative, but I was still had the stigma of being positive, and nothing I could say would convince anybody that I was negative.
Incredible and unconscionable that information should have been published like that.
But I had to deal with it, and it was a source of information for both the prisoners and the staff members. I had to train our medical staff on what AIDS was and how you treated it, because they had no clue.
Incredible.
They were public health nurses, not hospital nurses.
Yeah.
And suddenly they were having to become hospital-type nurses with our HIV patients. And the medications that were available at that time were not available to those in the jail.
My gosh. The things we take for granted today.
Well,
Yeah.
later on, I found out that many of the cancer patients and the HIV patients were not getting the medications that they needed to stay alive. So I went through the chain of command by what was supposed to be the regular route of getting things done. It went all the way to the top man, and he said, we can't afford to pay for all this stuff. We're not going to do it. And I went to public health. The director of public health said this would bankrupt the entire city.
My gosh.
Well, that wasn't right, because they were paying for Viagra for prisoners in jail. We didn't need that.
Wow. Wow.
We were paying for other things that they didn't need in jail. So I went to another reporter that I knew, gave them the sources that they would need to track this whole story down. And about 2 months later, a quiet little story developed in the paper that prisoners were being denied their medications because it cost too much.
Wow.
Well, that policy changed within a few weeks and expanded and went in to become part of the statewide prison system for the California Department of Corrections also.
Incredible.
So one person can make a difference.
You mentioned there was a little piece in here that you felt was very important to include. Let us have it.
Oh, you mean about it was a crime for me to leak that news out? Yes, it was. At that time.
How? Why?
It was against department policy, and I was not a spokesman for the department. Okay. And I could be reprimanded, and I was. I was denied rank after I placed well on the tests for advancement, and I was denied advancement for 2 different times. Well, 2 different ranks.
Okay.
And they went below me on the rankings and picked 22 other people up first.
In the end, what happened?
I was offered the opportunity to stay at work and get a new ranking. But my health at that time had deteriorated because I'd been in a chemical fire at work that had destroyed my lungs.
Oh.
And my doctor said if I stayed at work, he gave me a 5% chance of living 6 months. And at that point, I had a 1-month-old baby in my arms that my 2 husbands and I had adopted. And I thought it was more important that I see my son graduate from high school. So I quit. Went out on disability. But they only gave me 11% of my regular income to live on.
So, Joe, we're in your storeroom. This is fascinating. I'm a little overwhelmed at the volume of leathers and things that you have here. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts about mentorship. What did your mentors teach you?
When I came out, I met the owners of Leather Forever. One of them, Pitt, took me under his wing, and we spent a weekend together, my second weekend out. And in one weekend, I went from being a novice, total newbie in the bondage, cock and ball torture, tit torture, bondage, suspension, piercing, flogging, whipping, fucking. Well, it was the first time I ever got fucked, and fisting, all in one weekend.
All right.
But he was also a designer of leathers and got me going on making my own. I have a body frame that is a little unique, and so stuff off the rack seldom fits.
Okay.
And I like things to fit a little better. And these are some of my colors that I use when making my fancy stuff. And these leathers over here are the more of the heavy garments, like for motorcycle wear, and some of the heavier play work. So I use anywhere from 40 to 60 hides of leather a year.
Wow.
And of different kinds. I have, this is lambskin, pigskin, and lightweight leathers over here. And then this is all cowhide and a few horse hides.
Wow.
Here.
Wow.
But I have over 160 hides of leather in here.
My gosh.
And I'll go through a quarter to half of it every year.
My gosh. How do you feel mentorship should be conducted in the community?
With me, my early mentors, the doctors I learned how to fist from, saved my life, probably, because they encouraged me to, if I was going to be doing that, to be clean and sober while doing it, because it was so important. So many people got injured in the early days of fisting in the 60s, 70s, and 80s because they didn't have any information and they did things that were totally wrong for your body. The drugs do not help, and they mask problems that happen while you're playing that way. Same thing with the flogging and the whipping. You have to be aware of your body. It's too easy for it to send it in a wrong direction.
Yeah.
I've had people that were so sensitive to the shock of their body from just a single stroke of the flogger that it could send them into a heart attack.
Wow.
Now, that's not something you want to do.
Right.
I was trained by medical professionals, myself included, and other people who were well experienced with this stuff. And I am proud to say that I have only injured one person, and that person I injured with a feather. I had him tied down and I tickled him and he broke his arm trying to...
Oh.
That is my sole injury. I, as a paramedic, had so many problems that at least once every 2 weeks, I was picking up somebody from a sexual escapade that was injured. And some of these were life-threatening or even deadly. We had one guy that the person fisting him reached up, grabbed, and pulled and tore, and the guy bled to death before we even got there.
Oh.
We had another one that there was so much grease on his hand that he dipped it into sand. They were out in the backyard. Dipped his hand into sand to get some grip. Well, it became infected, and the guy lost his asshole permanently from the infection because it was a cat litter box for cats. Just basic idea. And then the other thing of motorcyclists, you can't drive a bike when you're drunk.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you how many times in the early days, in the 70s, we had, well, let's have a memorial to pay for the funeral expenses of this guy or that guy. It was happening like once every 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Somebody was getting hurt, killed in a motorcycle accident because they were drunk or stoned. Not a good thing. And some of the drugs that came out in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s were just horrible. I was fortunate when I was going through the Navy. I was trained in San Diego, and we did all of the autopsies for everybody coming from Vietnam. The doctors who did the autopsies there showed us what happened to the bodies of these people who had died from their drug use. And they were able to pinpoint, this guy started drugs a few weeks ago, a few months ago,
wow.
OD'd on his second try.
Wow.
Because
wow.
other people who had been there for a year were giving him stuff that they were using that was far too strong for them.
Sure.
So I backed away from a lot of that. And I've encouraged people to do that and be kind to your body.
Now, if you could offer one piece of mentorship advice to some new person entering our community, what one particular piece would you like them to know?
Learn as much as you can from reliable sources who know what the fuck they're talking about, and not some religious fanatic, and not from a porn film.
What are your thoughts about leather? There's something very specific here that I think you'd like to share with us.
Leather is extremely sensual, but it's also fun. And too many people take the leather scene far too serious. I like to have fun, and I think leather is one of the most sensual things that you can add to your sex life. It feels good, it smells good, it tastes good. and I sleep on leather every night. My sheets are all leather sheets on the bottom, and I work with leather almost every day, and I wear it quite frequently. So I find it quite erotic. I find it exciting, sexually, visually, sensually, and I think it adds to more men than it subtracts from them. However, it is not always slimming.
Well, Joe, I've got to tell you, this has been an incredible interview, and I did not expect it to be as wonderful as it has been. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to introduce your friend here.
This is Sherbert.
Sherbert. Okay. And how do we know one another?
We found him in a secondhand store.
Okay.
And rescued him. He's our rescue animal for the time being.
Well, I knew we needed to include him, so I'm glad we did. Now, you've been in the community 50 years or more.
Since 1970.
You've probably seen everything and pretty much done everything. What advice can you offer someone new coming into the community?
Do a little bit of research. Try and find the most reliable people out there. Because of my career in law enforcement and as a paramedic, I found way too many of the people who take advantage of our gay community. And in that includes a lot of gay men and lesbians. There were a number of unscrupulous business people who robbed us of so much of our community, both of our donations for the various AIDS foundations and cancers, that sort of stuff. A lot of our charity organizations and even our groups had people that took advantage of the groups and their trust. Yes, be trustful, but be allotted out as it's earned, not as it's demanded. Work with the people that you find to be the most honest and truthful with you. A lot of the shop owners will be able to tell you truthfully about their products unless they're just out there to get the fast buck. Go for quality. If you're buying your leathers, if you can afford the quality, good quality will last you a long time. And in the long run will be less, because buying a good pair of pants that's going to last you 50 years is better than having to buy the same pair of pants 4 or 5 times because they tear or whatever. The other part of that problem is, how much weight did you gain? But the same with shirts and jackets and stuff. Your body will change over time. It's not going to fit forever. That's for the leather. Enjoy yourself. Make it a good time. It doesn't have to be a hard job, but being gay does come with costs. And it's going to cost you to be open and honest, and it's going to cost you more to lie about your existence and what you really are. You don't have to give them too much detail. They don't want to know about your intimate bedroom stuff in the overall whole community, or even in the gay community. They don't want to know about your details. Keep your private life private, but be open about the fact that you are gay or lesbian.
Now, what are your thoughts about today's community?
We're still having to fight, and they're more insidious. The Republicans have been more insidious about taking our rights and privileges away. I have adopted a son 26 years ago, and now in some states I am no longer qualified to adopt, even though my background is even better than it was back then. They're taking away our voting rights in some places because they're arresting us just for being at a place where gay people gather.
Yeah.
We're going backwards on a lot of political things that we should be moving forward.
Important to point out as we were recording this on February 2nd, 2024, at a rather tumultuous time in the political arena in the United States. So,
to say the least. And
yeah.
There are people who want to take, there are some people who are still planning to put us into concentration camps.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. What, or rather, how would you like to be remembered by the Leather Kink community?
As an instructor, a teacher, an innovator, and a leatherman. I do all of those things. I've instructed classes for years on how people can get into law enforcement if you're gay or lesbian. I've also taught with Officers for Justice, which is a Black group. I've talked with the women's group on how women get into law enforcement, but I've also taught fisting for fun and how to handcuff and uniforms. If you have a skill, share it. If you don't know about it, find somebody who has that skill and can teach you.
What's the biggest misconception about you?
People think they know me and they don't. I'm a multifaceted person, and I have many aspects of what I do and how I am. And a lot of it is adaptable to the situation that I'm in at the time. You will never see a film of me in bed with somebody or having sex, but I've had some wonderful, wild, but safe experiences in the sexual world.
So I'll come over and join you here as we wrap up.
Well, Joe, it's been an amazing day. Thank you for having us over to your home and showing all of your beautiful things. And thank you for sharing all of your information for Inside Leather History, a Fireside Chat.
Well, thank you for coming.
Maybe I will later.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out the Fireside Chat channel for more chapters in the history of leather. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe.